Hello and welcome to the Villager Missile Barrage tutorial. Again, I'm starting here at the 3 command blocks we used in the Villager Rocket tutorial. But if you don't have these, then let's just review them. So this one creates a smoke trail behind the villager. This isn't unchanged, other than the fact that we're going to be spawning villagers called Dinnerbone, like in the Villager Missile tutorial. So make sure to change this name and use this command. This command is to move the villager. Here we want negative 0.3 so the villager goes downward. And here, this command creates a flame trail. Nothing unchanged here other than the fact that our villagers will be called Dinnerbone. So, let's move on to the command block system responsible for the barrage. And here you go. It's a bit of a complex system this time, but first let's go over a few things. In order for the system to work, you're going to need to utilize the scoreboard commands. Now, I realize there's probably some of you out there who don't know how to use scoreboards, so I've included a video in the description, which is the video that I used to learn how to use the scoreboard commands. It's a bit of a long video, but it works. It helped me a lot. But nonetheless, I'm going to do a quick review of the scoreboard commands that I used for this system. Now, in order to create a scoreboard, you want to use this command, scoreboard objectives add. My scoreboard is called Barrage, but you can name it whatever you want. Say you wanted to name it Flare Dummy. There you go. So that would be, this is the command you would use if you wanted to make a scoreboard called Flare. And as you can see, I have two items underneath that scoreboard, Beacon and Flare. This command system, I'm using the Flare item, or the Flare quote-unquote player. So in order to add a player to a scoreboard, /scoreboard players add, let's say we wanted to add a player named Signal, and then you have to say what scoreboard you want to add to. So in this case, the only scoreboard I have is Barrage, but, you know, and then you have to say what score that player or item is going to start out with. So if we wanted to add a player called Signal to our scoreboard with a score of 0, that is the command that I would use to do so, but I don't need another player on my scoreboard right now, so we're not going to do that. So, and another thing I need to go over is that, of course, you need a spawn egg, right? You want to name the spawn egg of a mob with high health, because the way the system works is that when you place down your mob, the villagers will start bombarding that area, and once that mob that you've placed down dies, the barrage will stop. So if you use something with low health, like an endermite or a silverfish, the barrage will only last a few missiles. If it gets to more than one at all, the first missile could kill your silverfish, and then that's barrage over. You want to use something with a good amount of health, just so the barrage has some length to it. Now, let's get to the first commands here. So, I've named my Ravager here, my Ravager spawn egg flare. And here, you can see, once I place that down, it'll get a rising dust particle effect, which makes it look like a flare, which is, of course, why I named it flare. The next command keeps the Ravager in place, so the area that the villagers will bombard will stay in one place and won't move around. This command just teleports the Ravager to itself. And obviously, just like in the missile tutorial, you want a comparator leading out of that block, but I'll get to this command in a second. And then this one makes the Ravager invisible, so it just looks like a flare. And again, you want another comparator leading out of that one. So this command assigns the player on my scoreboard a score between 1 and 4. You might be wondering why I need a total of 4 scores, and that's because there's 4 possible different locations in which a villager will spawn, because obviously I want the barrage to be somewhat random. So when I place down a Ravager with the name Flare, then this whole system will activate, because these two command blocks will start working, and these two comparators will then output a signal. So when I place down the Ravager, the signal will come out of here, and a random score will be assigned to Flare, a score 1 through 4, and let's say the score is 1. Each one of these detects the score 1 through 4. See, these are all the same system. You're going to want to familiarize yourself with it, because you're going to be making it 4 times. But if it's the exact same thing other than the few starting commands here. So, well, if we're assigned the score 1, this detects if the score is 1, then this command block will start working and a signal will be produced, spawning a villager 50 blocks above Flare or Ravager. But let's say the score is 2, then the villager will be spawned slightly in a different location. As you can see, 3 blocks more in the X value and 3 blocks more in the Z value. And once that spawns, we want to set the score to 0. This is so that once the Ravager dies, the score will be set to 0, so it just resets the system. And then you might be wondering why there's a blank space here, but I'll get to that in a second. But here are the 4 commands responsible for the explosion. All of these will need a tick delay of 160 ticks, other than this one, which needs a tick delay of 161. This is a preventative measure, as sometimes the villagers don't get killed by the explosions, and if they don't die, then the system kind of breaks down. So you need to make sure that the villager dies so a new one can be spawned, and it doesn't mess up the commands. So, this command, as you can see, it summons a TNT minecart. It basically summons an instant explosion on our villager, simulating the explosion of a missile. This one resets the score between 2 and 4. It just makes sure that the barrage keeps going, and it makes sure that the same missile isn't fired twice in a row. It adds a random element to it. And then lastly, we have our Ender Crystal, just makes the explosion larger. So you're going to want to make 4 of these. Obviously, you want the score test to be different for each one, so, you need 4 different ones. And of course, you want the villager to spawn in 4 different locations. You want 4 different possible locations to spawn. This command stays the same on all of them. And the only one that changes on this, out of these 4, is this one, because obviously we want to change the last 2 values here. So if we were on, number 2, we would change this to command blocks 3 through 4. So just make sure that the same command block doesn't get picked twice. And yeah, so I've essentially just made the same thing, except 1 for each score. So just repeat this 3 times after you've made the first one. And now we're gonna get over here to our on and off safety mechanism. So you might be wondering, well, why is there a blank space here? Surely the redstone signal won't reach, and all these commands will never happen. Well, this is because this is to prevent the score being just reset over and over again. Because again, the way this works is that once the Ravager dies, the system stops. And if we don't have this in place, then random scores will keep being assigned. And no villagers will spawn and nothing will explode because the Ravager is dead, and therefore no villagers will spawn. But your score will still be switched around on the side there, and redstone signals will still be sent repeatedly. And in order to stop that, I've created this system. So, out of your invisibility command here, you want a comparator, and that will lead to a piston. And in the unextended position, you want these commands. So you want to get the coordinates of each of these blank spaces. And what these command blocks do is, when the piston retracts because the Ravager has died, it will remove blocks from these places. But when the piston is extended, then new blocks will spawn there. So as you can see, the coordinates, this is the coordinates for one of the blank spaces, and when I place down the Ravager, this piston will extend, and a dirt block will spawn, thus completing the circuit and allowing the barrage to happen. But when the Ravager dies, the piston will retract, and over here, those blocks are essentially deleted, making the circuit incomplete and making sure the score isn't just reset repeatedly. So, just get your coordinates for each of these, and make sure that they are filled when a Ravager is spawned. It's all pretty much the same command, just the coordinates are swapped. So just make sure you get your coordinates right, because if you get them wrong, you might accidentally delete parts of your system. I've done that before. I accidentally put the wrong coordinates, and I deleted an entire one of these. I deleted like an entire row. So please make sure to get them right. It can be a bit frustrating when you get it wrong and you accidentally replace your circuits with dirt or with air. But yeah, that is the system. So we can take a look at the system in action here. I have the flare in my hand. So I've set up this small village, you could say. And if I were to place this down, a Ravager spawns, but you can't see because it's invisible, and villagers will start raining down from the sky. And it's not like the missiles. As you can see, it's a bit random. This one spawned over here this time, and it exploded, and as soon as that one explodes, another one spawns. And it will keep doing this until the invisible Ravager dies, so your barrage might have some life to it. There we go. And again, just to reiterate, please use a high health mob. The end crystals do a lot of explosion damage, so if you use something with low health, then the barrage won't last long at all. And if you want, you can switch up the coordinates as well. You don't have to use the same coordinates as I do. And there you go, the Ravager has died. Obviously, if you want the barrage to last even longer, you can add more rows of these. You can add more of these mechanisms to make more possibilities, so that the villagers won't always land so close to the Ravager, meaning that the Ravager lasts for longer, meaning the barrage lasts for longer. Obviously, we didn't get entirely lucky with that one. The barrage didn't last too long because the Ravager was killed, but if you put your coordinates far enough away, you can have a barrage that goes on for forever. As you can see, it's pretty devastating. This house was essentially destroyed, and this one got a good chunk taken out of it. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you whenever I post next. By the way, feel free to leave any questions in the comments. See ya. Cue line from the future here. I've upgraded the design for this system a little bit. The problem with the last design is that it would only fire 4 to 5 missiles on average, and that didn't feel like a true barrage to me, so I've actually improved the design so it shoots more missiles. See, the way our last design functioned was that once we spawn our Ravager, the Ravager is used as a reference point for the missiles to spawn around. However, once the Ravager dies, then the missiles can no longer spawn. In this case, we just added another mob to use as a reference point, so that when the Ravager dies, the missiles can still spawn. So let's jump into the tutorial for how to do this, how to improve our system here. So, I've added this command block. I've called the new mob, it's another Ravager, Extender, because obviously we're extending the barrage out so that more missiles fire. As you can see, this is just a simple teleport command to keep the mob in place. Now, you might be wondering when the mob spawns in, and that's over here. When the random score gets set for the first time, add 2 command blocks over here. The first one will summon our new Ravager Extender, and I summoned it 20 blocks above our original Ravager, just so that it doesn't actually take any damage from the missiles. So it lives, and the barrage goes on until finally, whoops, I added something there. Over here is our second command block, and this actually kills the Ravager, ending the barrage. Obviously, you're going to want to set a tick delay on this. I've set the tick delay to 1300, but you can set it to whatever you want. Obviously, you can adjust this so that your barrage lasts as long as you want. And then over here, our safety mechanism, I've changed it so that obviously the system doesn't get shut off anymore after the first Ravager dies. It gets shut off after our extending Ravager dies. So it's the same command, but it's with the new Ravager. The system works the same, and then I've set the invisibility one over here for the first Ravager, as we don't really need the output for the comparator anymore. So you may have noticed, the new Ravager gets summoned 20 blocks above the original one. And if we're going to use it as a reference point for the villagers, that means we need to spawn the villagers in different places as well. If you remember, we spawned the villagers 50 blocks above the original Ravager. However, since our new Ravager is already 20 blocks high, we need to change it so it's only 30, so that way 30 plus 20 equals, of course, 50. So, with these few adjustments, you should be set. Just make sure to change the Y coordinate for the villagers to 30 for all of these, and then add the couple command blocks over here, change positions. So we have our teleport one here, we have our invisibility one here, we have our summon one here, right next to the set score, and we have the kill one over here. Be sure to add your 4 command blocks, move the invisibility one for the original Ravager over, because we don't need its output into the comparator anymore, and change the coordinates for the villagers, and it should work exactly the same, except the barrage will go on for longer.